Was anything cut from Blazing Saddles? Legally, the studio couldn't touch it. Mel Brooks had final cut written into his contract. Warner Brothers could beg, but they couldn't force a single frame out. And yet, one joke did get cut. Not by the studio, by Brooks himself. It was a line so risky that even the man who put a farting cowboy campfire on the big screen looked at it and said, "That's too far." 50 years later, that story, straight from Brooks' own mouth, is still one of the strangest footnotes in comedy history. Along with it, a Broadway unknown replacing the man the film was written for, an actor who collapsed on day one, a cameo John Wayne turned down, and a studio boss who tried to have the whole film quietly buried. This is the real story behind Blazing Saddles. By 1974, America wasn't in the mood for a gentle comedy. Vietnam had just ended. Watergate was unraveling Nixon's presidency in real time. Faith in institutions was at a low point, and the civil rights movement had won major legal victories. But the culture, especially Hollywood, hadn't caught up. Westerns were still the genre of clean-cut white heroes and silent backdrops. Mel Brooks didn't want to gently poke fun at that. He wanted to demolish it. The setup is simple. A corrupt land baron wants to run the settlers out of Rock Ridge. So he convinces the governor to install a black sheriff, betting the town will panic and flee. Instead, Bart, played by Cleavon Little, turns out to be smarter than every white man in town, and the prank backfires spectacularly. It looks like slapstick. Underneath, it's a movie about how fast racism collapses once you hold it up to ridicule. Brooks had backup on that front. His co-writer was Richard Pryor, arguably the sharpest comic voice of the era, who helped give Bart's dialogue real teeth. Audiences weren't used to hearing racial slurs used against racism in a mainstream comedy. They weren't used to toilet humor in a major studio release. And they definitely weren't used to watching a black hero consistently outsmart every white authority figure in the film. Brooks pushed every boundary he could find, and by his own later admission, a few he initially pulled back from. The ending says as much as the plot. Instead of a clean Old West finish, the final brawl smashes through the studio walls entirely, spilling out of Rock Ridge, across other sound stages, into the Warner Brothers lot, and finally into a theater playing the very film we're watching. It's one of the earliest fully self-aware endings in American comedy, years ahead of the meta-gags of Ferris Bueller or Deadpool. But buried in the film's history is a joke that never made it to theaters at all, and the true story behind it is stranger than most of the fan rumors. In the finished film, there's a scene where saloon singer Lily Von Shtupp, Madeline Kahn, doing a note-perfect Marlene Dietrich impression, tries to seduce Sheriff Bart in her dressing room. It's flirtatious, a little risque, and it ends with one of the film's most quoted exchanges. Here's what actually happened, according to Brooks' own retelling in later interviews, including a well-known appearance on Conan O'Brien's show. The candles go out, and in the dark, Lily asks Bart, in her thick German accent, whether the rumors about black men are true. There's a pause, and then Bart's deadpan reply lands the joke. That line made the final cut and became one of the movie's signature moments. But Brooks has said there was originally more, a beat right before that line where the sound design made clear exactly what Lily was doing in the dark. Watching the dailies back, Brooks decided that one specific moment pushed past satire into something that would overwhelm everything else in the scene. So he cut it himself, before Warner Brothers ever weighed in. It's a small detail, but it tells you something important. This wasn't a case of Brooks throwing anything and everything at the wall. He had a line, even in the most consciously offensive comedy of its decade. He just drew it in a very different place than most studios would have. Ironically, the studio wanted more cut, not less. Warner Brothers chief Ted Ashley reportedly cornered Brooks after an early screening and demanded he remove the bean-eating campfire scene, the horse-punching gag, and the Lily Von Shtupp exchange entirely. Brooks agreed out loud. Great, they're all out. Took Ashley's notes and did nothing. Every one of those scenes stayed in the final film. That single act of defiance is arguably why Blazing Saddles still works as a movie. Brooks was willing to self-censor when a joke genuinely crossed his own line, but he was not willing to let a nervous studio executive make that call for him. The campfire scene, where a group of cowboys sit around eating beans and audibly passing gas, was the first time a major Hollywood film had used flatulence as an actual sound gag rather than a cutaway joke. Test audiences reportedly laughed so hard they missed dialogue, so in post-production, Brooks leaned in further rather than trimming it back. That gag wasn't just juvenile humor for its own sake. Westerns had spent decades presenting cowboys as stoic, clean, mythic figures. Brooks wanted to show them as they probably were, sweaty, gassy, unglamorous men living rough. Warner Brothers executives reportedly called the scene vulgar and pointless. Brooks kept it anyway, and it's now one of the most cited firsts in mainstream comedy. The same appetite for chaos shows up in the film's Yiddish-speaking Native American scene. In a flashback to Bart's childhood, his family is surrounded by warriors on horseback, until the tribal chief, played by Brooks himself, starts speaking not in any Hollywood-invented movie India language, but in fluent Yiddish, complete with other writers responding in kind. It's a jarring, funny left turn, and a deliberate one. By handing indigenous characters a language and culture Hollywood Westerns had never bothered to give them, Brooks was pointing directly at how flattened and dehumanized those characters usually were on screen. Then there's the accident nobody planned. During the climactic brawl that spills out of the studio and onto the Warner Brothers backlit, a man in an ordinary sweater strolls calmly through the middle of the shot. He wasn't an extra, wasn't in costume, and had no idea film was rolling. He simply wandered into frame. Rather than cut and reshoot, Brooks reportedly told the crew to leave it in because it was funnier that way. It stayed in the final cut, a genuine unplanned blooper hiding in plain sight in one of the most quoted comedies ever made. Brooks built the whole production around that kind of openness to accidents. Gene Wilder was encouraged to underplay and improvise as the Waco Kid. Cleveland Little brought a dry, understated timing to Bart that wasn't fully scripted. Madeline Kahn improvised several of Lily Von Stupp's most memorable moments, including her exaggerated, breathy performance style. Even the film's opening theme plays into the joke. The title song was performed with total sincerity by Frankie Lane, a veteran Western vocalist known for serious, dramatic ballads. Brooks reportedly didn't tell him the film was a comedy. Lane sang it completely straight, treating the over-the-top lyrics like they belonged in a genuine epic. The mismatch between his sincerity and the film's absurdity is its own kind of joke, and it works precisely because Lane never winks at the camera. When Warner Brothers executives first watched the finished film, the reaction was reportedly stone silence. No laughs, no applause. One executive is said to have called it too vulgar for American audiences. Another allegedly predicted it would end Brooks' career. Brooks had leverage most directors didn't, contractual final cut. The studio couldn't legally force changes without his sign-off. So instead, insiders say Ted Ashley tried a quieter approach. Release the film in a handful of cities, let it die without fanfare, and avoid the embarrassment of a loud flop or a loud controversy either way. Brooks wasn't a stranger to studio nerves. His earlier film, The Producers, built around a fictional musical called Springtime for Hitler, had already tested audiences' comfort and won him an Academy Award for the screenplay. But Blazing Saddles was louder, riskier, and far less interested in playing it safe, and Brooks knew it. Production trouble started well before the studio ever saw a finished cut. Richard Pryor, who co-wrote the script and was Brooks' original choice to play Bart, couldn't be insured by Warner Brothers because of a recent narcotics arrest. Without insurance, he legally couldn't be hired for the role he helped write. The part went instead to Cleveland Little, a Broadway actor with no major film credits at the time. The casting of the Waco Kid was even more chaotic. The role first went to Gig Young, an Oscar-winning actor whose worn, dry screen presence seemed perfect on paper. On his very first day of filming, the scene where the Waco Kid wakes up hanging in a jail cell, Young collapsed on set, reportedly from alcohol withdrawal. Production stopped cold. Brooks, desperate, called Gene Wilder, who had worked with him on The Producers. Wilder said yes on the spot, flew out, and was filming within a day. His performance became one of the most beloved elements of the entire film. Even John Wayne makes a cameo in the film's story, if not on screen. Brooks reportedly offered him a role, and Wayne turned it down as too blue for his image, old Hollywood shorthand for too crude, while telling Brooks he'd still be first in line to see it. Against every one of those odds, the film opened in February 1974 to a small release in a few major cities, and exploded. Theaters extended runs to keep up with demand, and Warner Brothers, having tried to quietly bury the movie, scrambled to expand distribution nationwide. By the end of its run, it had earned over $100 million, becoming the studio's biggest comedy hit of the year. Losing Richard Pryor as its lead could have sunk the film.